And I just will take a roll call of our commission members. Nancy Nelson.
Here.
Rebecca Lemaitre.
Here.
I know she's here.
Here.
Tom Beardsley.
Yeah.
And then I'd welcome our guests, Marcia Rasmussen, our select board representative, Linda Escobedo, and David Ottinger.
You.
And is there somebody else? Alan. Hi, Alan. Alan Bogosian also is here.
Hi, Alan.
Thank you. Okay, so first order of business is recommendation for the Ball Benson House and Barn. So I would turn it over to Marcia and David.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa. The planning division has been working with David Ottinger for several years now to consider how we might reuse or adapt the Ball Benson House. And David has come up with a possibility that we wanted to put before the Historical Commission before we engage in a conversation with the public at large to talk about the Wheeler Harrington House and the Harrington Park property. So David has had extensive experience conserving buildings in museum settings, and he worked very closely with Jerry Bemis in taking apart the Ball Benson House, which I'm going to let David talk to because he's very engaging in how he presents this. So David, it's all yours.
Hi, is this work? Can you see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Great. All right. This is what we discovered in 2001. I was hired in over the summer of 2001 to dismantle the house and barn on Balls Hill Road, and the property, to put it in a little bit of perspective, the buildings had captured people's imaginations for a long period of time. Thoreau talked about walking by in the 1850s. It's located in the northeast corner of Concord, in the outskirts of Concord. And in the early 20th century, this fellow Gleason, photographer, went through and photographed the property also. And you get a real sense of the setting and the connection between the barn and the house. So we were hired by Jerry Bemis. She'd grown up in Concord and was kind of fascinated by this house as a child and had ridden her bicycle by. And when after this decision to purchase the property and sell the land to an abutter with this house on it, that was kind of a loose end. And she came forward and started she set up a Balls Hill Preservation Trust and funded us dismantling the buildings. And they were put into 2 trailers, which have been for 20 years now at the Concord wastewater treatment plant site. We did go in I think it was 2017, and opened the doors and looked in, and it seemed the material seemed to be in good shape. Usually when you open them up and you look inside and it smells damp and all that's a bad sign, but it seems like the materials are still fine. It was a very unusual project for me. I'd been dismantling buildings for many years, but she kind of involved herself in it, and kind of I looked at the whole process in a new way. And the other thing that was kind of unique to me was the connection with Concord, and there had been genealogical research done, and there was an archaeological dig. There was a whole bunch of stuff. So we generated a lot of information about these buildings as we took them apart. And that we kind of rose to the occasion in the sense that we took an awful lot of photographs. She, I think, has in the thousands, and I have in the hundreds. So it's very well documented. There were 2 architects involved, so it's heavily documented, dismantling these buildings. To get a sense of what was there, you can see up in the left, well, how about in the right? My screen is kind of obscured. The original house is the one with the sheathing still on it, the brown part, and then they added a lean-to onto the back very early on. So this is the mid 18th century, and they added this lean-to quite early. You get a sense of how they added the chimney was a center chimney, and they added onto the back. If you look at looking up into the roof, you can see the added back flue and the evidence of that. So there was a lot of evidence of the changes over time. The main house originally had 2 rooms, and there was this one room with a large fireplace. It was sort of a medieval hall, you know, very ancient seeming. Large, you can see in that upper right where there was a large fireplace, you know, with the oven. That had all been taken out in the early 20th century, and a staircase had been put in. So this house was changed over time. And although we could discover a lot about the original house, it had been altered and changed. So it's wasn't fixed in time the way some buildings are. Jerry got very interested in saving all the wallpaper. There were a lot of layers of wallpaper. And because of this process, we spent a lot of time looking at what we were finding. There were a lot of inscriptions behind the sheathing in that same room, that red feather boarded room, was John Ball, who, you know, is believed to be the owner and the builder, the original builder. In the walls was this brick. It's called nogging. It's a form of insulation, or possibly, you know, to give people a sense of protection, but more likely for insulation. The beams were cased early on, and when we were taking the casing apart, this piece of paper fell out, which was sort of intriguing. And one of the people working there was sweeping up and noticed it and unfolded it. And what it said basically was that this must be the following or the minuar to warn. And we didn't quite know what it meant, but when we went down to the Concord Bridge, we discovered those were the first people who got to the Concord Bridge. So it seems like there may be some significance with this piece of paper as far as what happened in Concord in 1775. The papers of the period, and I think it's oak gall ink, so it's early. Other things we found was this, evidence of in the early 19th century. There was a room in the back. Again, when you take these houses apart, you know, you can learn a lot about what's happening, and we certainly discovered that there's a clear line in the floor where there had been a later room, and because of the information that Concord had generated, you know, people in Concord had researched and generated, there was a deed that we found, and it talked about the daughter Naomi having this room available to her. So we're finding physically what the documentation suggests. Another interesting thing we found was apparently in the 18th, 17th, and 18th century, there's this tradition of concealing objects in houses. And we found this shoe over the door, going from the front to the back. It was in such a way that it couldn't have been dragged in there, you know, a rat or something couldn't have moved in there. It was carefully placed. And somebody went, I think it was at the Concord Athenaeum or something. Somebody took it there, and we discovered there was a shoe registry in Europe, and they keep track of these things, and they commonly found them. And, you know, what gets interesting is why would they have done it? And there's this there's this book, Conversing with Signs, that Robert Blair St. George wrote, which talks about houses having a meaning in terms of the human body in the 17th and 18th century. And they were thinking of openings, doors, windows, doors as mouths and windows as eyes. And what they were doing apparently was putting these symbolic objects in places where there are openings to ward off spirits. Now, that sounds very different from the way we look at the world now, but you get a sense when you're taking apart the house of, you know, what was happening then. The other type of material we found was the reuse of early, for instance, they had plank frames originally, they had changed them, but we found pieces of the plank frames reused. So you can basically go back and reconstruct the house based on this sort of evidence that we found. So I guess I'm trying to go through this pretty quickly if you have any questions. So the question for me essentially was, aside from, you know, determining if the materials were still there and viable, you know, what I could suggest for uses. And, you know, there are obvious uses to reassemble the house as a house. And I took a look at that, and that's certainly a possibility. It could be constructed, you know, as a freestanding building, as a museum, offices, or storage. One issue with it is because it was, you know, what you're looking at on the right is this original floor plan, but because it had been so changed over time, you know, a lot of that is sort of supposition. You know, you can figure out from the evidence some things, but the ability to put it back as a perfect original building is a little bit, you know, they certainly do it, but it's not a building like some of the other buildings you have in Concord where there's a lot of original fabric. But that certainly is a possibility. Same with the barn. The original barn was this 18th century, it's called an English barn. It's got the door on the side. So in this Gleason photograph, you're actually looking at the end of it. And if you look at that drawing that the architect had done, you get a sense of what that would look like. Over time, they had added on the back a lean-to. As the use of the land in the barn changed, they made it, they had cows in the back. So there were cow stanchions that we saved. We saved a lot of the material related to it, despite it wasn't of the original period. And then later on, I think after actually this photograph, when we got there, they'd added another lean-to on the end, which looked like it was for, you know, tractor repairs and mechanical, you know, repairs. So it had been enlarged from the roughly 1,200 square feet. It was also built into, there was a large cellar. It was sort of built into a hill. So there was some stuff, there was some room down there. So obviously you can reassemble the barn as a barn for storage in the original configuration, with the two lean-tos increasing the space. One thing that, as I kind of thought about it and as an idea, would be to reassemble the barn. And as it turns out, there's enough room in the barn to actually reassemble the house as a study house. And the concept that kind of caught my imagination was at the museum, the National Museum of American History. They had a house from Ipswich, Mass. That they'd assembled, and it was kind of a intact house the way you think of houses, and they took it down. It didn't really have a use, and then they reimagined it in May 2000. This is from the photograph, but they looked at it more as a place to, you know, as a way to study. It's set up with a whole series of rooms to different periods. I believe that there's 5 different periods that are represented there. You can see the structure of the building, and you can learn, you know, from that, you know, how the house was built and what it had. And so I'm suggesting another possibility for these buildings is to fit them into the old barn. You can see how it would work out. That's the floor plan, you know, dropped into the floor plan of the old barn. And because of this grade, which actually is true in the site that we kind of settled on, you know, it seems like it would fit in there. Again, this doesn't have to be done immediately. Possibility of, say, reassembling the barn and having this as something to do in the future could happen. You know, I kind of thought it might make some sense to put the barn back up and just store the house for the time being, and, you know, use it in some way or other. And this is the site. I was supposed to look around, and I looked at 5 different sites, but the one site that seemed to have the most possibility, like for instance, the Old Manse, you know, they've been looking for a barn, and I contacted them, but they weren't at a point where they were interested in, you know, committing to putting up a barn. So this site, you know, the Wheeler Harrington property, adjacent to the parking lot, removed from where the houses are, seemed like, because of the topography, because it can be removed from the floodplain, seemed like a reasonable place to put it. So that's what I'm offering.
If I can add that we've had a preliminary conversation with the Natural Resources Commission, and they felt that it was not an inappropriate use of the Harrington Park, so that this is a possibility that could go forward if we wanted to pursue it. It would be a way of saving a piece of Concord history. We'd have to, as David mentioned, it was funded by the Bemis family. Jerry Bemis, you know, set up a trust to take care of the dismantling and the protection and preservation of the structure. And so I think there would need to be some outreach about that, but it's a way of telling some of the story of Concord. And I'm intrigued with this particular property. The location that David has identified is I think far enough away from the Wheeler Harrington house and their outbuildings so that we could have that archaeological study for the Wheeler Harrington house separate from this particular location. Of course, if we were to do some excavation and discover something, we'd have to pause and do a further archaeological study in this particular location. But the sense was that it's far enough removed, and then the topography worked for the barn itself in the site that's located. Additionally, it would be immediately adjacent to the small parking area that is already in existence. And so there would be good access. And then how do we interpret that history and that story that we want to tell? So I did seek some community preservation funds that were approved at this past town meeting to conduct sort of a visioning session for how we might use the Wheeler Harrington house and property into the future. And we're starting with the Natural Resources Commission and with the Historical Commission, because your commissions are responsible for the property and for the house in terms of oversight and policy and so forth. So it's, if this is a vision that we can pursue, then it would be part of a presentation that we would make in a public forum and get some feedback from residents and from neighbors. So questions? We've lost Melissa.
Melissa's fire alarm keeps going off.
Oh, no.
So
There's a lot to think about here, that's for sure. I don't have an opinion yet. I think the house is really interesting. Is it true that the barn is much less intact, has much less integrity at this at the point when it was dismantled? Is that right? I'm trying to remember.
I would say I actually had done a proposal early on to rebuild the barn, and I would say it's maybe about 70 or 80% intact. There were some things that had the plates that went along the front, I think, were damaged and all that. There is a fair amount of integrity to it, but it does need to be repaired. It's not 100%.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I thought the fact that it opened at the side instead of the front and the L was added, right? Is that what I was picking up from the earlier?
Yeah, let's see. Okay, yeah. So the original core building is this one up to the right here, the so-called English barn. And it did open up on the side, which is standard.
We're looking at the sketch, not the photograph.
Yeah, pardon?
We're looking at the sketch.
Oh, you want to go back? Let's see. Let's see. There, how about that?
Right, yeah.
So, yeah, so that's the, okay. So that's the original, that's the architect's kind of rendering of what it would look like. That's the original
Right.
barn, right?
It's very much like what the Barrett barn was. A Barrett barn, as I remember, was an English barn as well.
And that's what the trustees wanted to put up next to the old man's, was an English barn.
Sort of.
Yeah, right. But can I suggest, if we really want to take your idea and think big, it strikes me there are a couple ways to imagine this. One is, has the town actually adopted anything as a bicentennial, as a project to mark the 250th?
Not yet. We don't even have, but I think they're still working on a charge for the committee. But
Right,
this would be a lovely project.
Well,
wouldn't
one
it?
could imagine that doing this would be a way to mark the 250. The other, which those commission have heard me say before, I think that Thoreau's idea that Concord should in effect have be a village university. It should have a Concord Committee on the Humanities or on American Studies really should be realized, because such an agency could oversee projects and opportunities like this. I mean, I look at this house and I see a fellowship in material culture and architectural history for grad students at BU and Harvard and all the schools in the area that could be competitive. Because you were talking about the house should be interpreted, but who's interpreting? Who's interpreting the Wheeler Harrington House? If you tied it to the education of graduate students, you could have someone live here for 2 years, and as part of their obligation would be to do some interpreting. But if we think of these as sort of one-offs, we can't advance larger understandings as effectively.
Yeah, just to chime in on that, I'll let others with much more knowledge speak to the feasibility of all this and the architecture and all that side of things. But in terms of community engagement, I love this idea of the within the walls, because I can see it as something that families would go to, not just tourist families, but local families, that it's something that would bring in school groups. You know, and I think one big question for me was which families would be featured if you're showing the house from different periods throughout the years, but I can definitely see a real wealth of just I don't know, just excitement. That note that was found in the rafters, I get goosebumps every time I think about it. So I think if stuff like that is presented to the community in an exciting, accessible way, that you'd get people who came a lot all the time. So.
My apologies, because I was engaged with the Concord Fire Department again. So I'm a little lost on where we are, but I presume part of this, Marcia, is all about what you were trying to pull together, ultimately a public process, a charrette or something to evaluate options for this barn and building as well as the Wheeler Harrington House?
Correct. There was funding approved at this year's town meeting from the Community Preservation to begin that public conversation. And before going forward with this concept, I wanted to make sure that it was aligned with the Historical Commission. The Natural Resources Commission has already agreed that it's a suitable location and use. They're concerned about overuse or too much use, but I think we can address that through a process of conversation about how it would be used.
Well, so has everyone spoken up?
Just can give a little bit of context to it, what Bob mentioned there about the American Studies Centre. In the old Manse plan for 2010, we had this idea to bring back a small barn and have it as an American Studies Centre and a small visitor centre. And it came up often in conversation, this barn. But unfortunately, the 2007-2008 recession came, so all that was moved to one side. However, it did come back onto the table in 2012, but certainly, as Nancy will recall, it morphed into a Disneyland visitor centre, which Nancy was able to put it to the sword. But I just
Not me. It was a group effort.
Nancy, part of a very active team to do it. But it certainly has just great potential with its longevity, its 18th century appearance, and the effect that it would have been at the manse where William Emerson's barn had been. So yeah, so much potential for it.
Can I add one other thing? These are not neither the Wheeler Harringtons nor the Balls were wealthy farmers. These are not gentlemen, but these are hard scrabble farmers. So when the question comes up, as it would in a multicultural, diverse world, why would we want to know this? Because these are the common folk.
Yeah.
I think it's excellent. Nancy, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, if Marcia wants a rousing endorsement, she certainly has mine, and I look forward to a public a series of public meetings where we could all, along with others, express us other ideas, but that's not really what you're looking for tonight. You really just want kind of an endorsement, right?
Well, I don't want you to say this is crazy. Why are we even thinking about bringing a house that was in the northeast of Concord into the western part of Concord when there's probably another location and we haven't thought of it. So I just there's I guess two levels I'm hoping for your support for. Is one, this is this idea of reinterpreting these structures in somewhere in Concord might be appropriate. And the second part is does this site make sense to you?
Gosh, that's a big
About the site,
I think, how many acres is this?
Harrington Park is quite large, but it's
More-
but that's a lot of floodplain. If you look, like half of it is floodplain. So
Yeah.
I want to say 16 acres maybe. But
Yeah,
I'd
that's
have to
my
look.
Well, I mean, to me, it would address also our concern about the maintenance, upkeep, and proper interpretation of the Wheeler Harrington property, which has really bothered us a long time. And this would be part of the whole package. I think it's a great idea. And I would love the idea that either it becomes its own center or it affiliates with perhaps a university. Because money is a problem, of course.
And I would just chime in with the house having already been moved from its original site. It would trouble me less to have it at least somewhere else in Concord than to lose it completely. And to me, having it here, you're close to West Concord Center, so you would get visitors. It wouldn't be sort of remote. And again, I think just the level of community engagement and excitement you would get would be really strong.
And I would tend to agree with Melissa. I think it's more about the structure than it is about the location. But I think
Yeah.
if you put it next to the Harrington structure, I think it's just a great supplement to
Oh,
it.
yeah.
But who would oversee that?
Well, that's what the whole public process would have to consider and determine, because there's gonna be a lot of, very expensive. And who runs it?
Well, who oversees it?
Yeah.
Right now, it's NRC's responsibility because
But
they own
I
the
think
property.
what I'm hearing is there's a lot of ideas, like what Bob was suggesting. It becomes kind of a center for American studies, that, again.
can I ask you, we need to raise money seriously for a center for the preservation of historic architecture. Imagine if we could get some local donors who are generous, but to get some major foundations involved. Think of all the different occasions we have where we're dealing with the loss of buildings, and sometimes when like 1710 Lowell Road, when the sellers would actually like to preserve it. We really have a strong need for an agency that can do that. And public agency, probably it's hard to imagine doing that. You need some kind of foundation.
I'm not opposed to this idea, but it's so new and maybe in a formative stage that I don't necessarily know what I think about it altogether. For everybody else's information, I was at a meeting today with Mass Audubon and other partners of Mass Audubon looking at their property out on Balls Hill Road that's adjacent to the town well site where this house used to be and barn used to be. And they are thinking about what to do with that property. And the aspirations are they're very big, even though they want to emphasize stewardship, not lots of public use and engagement. But I think we need to be realistic about what the function of this house is going to be. And we are in Concord, so there's these expansive ideas, and you should have seen the list that the Mass Audubon people had. It was really great. It was really great. Every single idea was a good one.
Absolutely.
But
Awesome.
all of them together, you know, I mean, how, but we should be wary of what other nonprofits are doing in town that might be similar. So we
Well,
should just
yeah.
be aware of that as we go forward. And that's the whole purpose of this engagement piece, I think. But to save that house and have it be, and maybe the barn, I don't know. That's a question still I have. Can you say both? Does it make sense? More to know.
Marcia, so what do you want from us?
Oh, you're on mute.
I'm sorry.
Am I still on mute? I don't think so.
No, Marcia's on mute. Now you're on mute.
To Nancy's, if I may, to Nancy's point, we purchased the Breen property on Virginia Road in 1998. It did not get transferred to the Thoreau Farm Trust until the 2020 teens.
Yeah.
And then they had to restore it. They had to explore it and restore it. And it's now a lovely,
Yeah.
they have an addition. It's a beautiful center. And
That's
we're
great.
using the land in a very productive manner. That took time. And it starts with these ideas that get generated. I mean, initially it was going to be EDCO taking over the property and they wanted an educational center and then the traffic became a problem and nobody wanted that. And so it was an evolutionary iterative process to get to where we are today. And it is so delightful and so wonderful to go into that house. I can see this as a springboard for those conversations. It may take time.
Yeah.
But as David pointed out, that house, the building, the structure that is in those trailers is currently stable. And we didn't see much evidence, if any, of insects or critters getting in there, and there was no smell of mold or mildew. So, I mean, I think we have some time, and this is the beginning step. So what I'm looking for from the Historical Commission is to say, yes, this is a great concept. Let's have it as part of the conversation.
Yeah, as part of the conversation, because who knows what else is going to come up. So I would hate to preclude any other great ideas that come up for the house. I'd love to see the house and maybe the barn.
Okay, so Heather, I mean, do I need to take a vote from everybody, or is there? I think the sense of the commission, I think, is yes, we'd like to explore this.
And can I ask if there is any opposition? Okay, I'm not seeing any opposition. That's great.
No,
Okay.
No.
Then we will proceed.
Oh, I think it's great.
Thank you. This is very, very helpful. I really appreciate having all of your input and expertise around this conversation topic.
Okay, well, so thank you. Then I guess we will move on to another very big topic, the Route 2A Mass DOT improvement project, which I hope you had an opportunity to read the documents that were on our website. I think there are a couple others that I forgot to ask Heather to add, but including Nancy had actually prepared kind of a memo, a lengthy memo with some very good comments.
Well, I sent a letter to Mass Highway DOT as myself.
I think the frustration that I certainly have, I mean, I prepared a letter that you see that I did right away. So it's pretty thin. So one thing I would appreciate from all of you is comments about what else we should put in the letter. But the other thing I'd like to say is that this process has been really sloppy. Not everyone has been informed, and we certainly haven't been informed in a uniform manner. I have spoken with the chair of the Historical Commission of Lexington. They have not even been officially informed about this. So it's very frustrating. I realize that Concord has a relatively small portion of Route 2A. However, we do care, certainly I think speaking for all of you, certainly myself, about the impact it would have on Minuteman National Historical Park. This is a very important historic road. It's also on an all-American road. So
And the Battle Road Scenic Byway.
highway. So I will stop and I will just ask Nancy if you would speak a little bit more because you are on that committee as well as Heather, the Battle Road Scenic Byway Committee.
So I think you hit on most of the issues. The process issue is very serious. Some towns have been engaged with Mass DOT intensively for well over a year. Other towns have not. The Historical Commission notification was really not adequate. They seem not to understand that there's a federal process that overlays this project because it's 75% federally funded. So they are trying to figure that out. They do understand that they've fouled something up, but they've presented a 25 to 75% set of plans. And this is not a 75% document. There's been no public meeting at all. No public meeting. There have been small stakeholder meetings. So usually by 75%, you've had public meetings, the issues have been worked out, and your project is basically buildable. But that's not where we are. So they're considering that. And the national park has brought up a lot of technical issues around this in terms of what information is needed. The other problem with it is everybody is talking about still phase 1 and phase 2. And if you look at the drawings that were presented, conceptual drawings, phase 2 drawings are pretty hefty in terms of roundabouts, additional lanes here and there. And I know that if the raised sidewalks with flashing lights aren't sufficient, there'll be more stoplights. So it's really not okay to have a segmented project. You need to know what the ultimate desire is before you approve phase 1. The kinds of information needed are, there are, if you listen to Lincoln, there are 5 crosswalks that they want. Only 3 are in the 75% drawings, but Mass Highway said they'll add those back. But every single one, except one, land begins on the national park side and lands on the national park side with no connecting path to the national park trails. So they're basically sidewalks to nowhere unless and until the national park agrees to do accessible trails to connect to their trails. So the widening of Route 2A is not known yet. Lincoln has proposed a new retaining wall in a major section in order to accommodate a bike lane. And so there's a lot of things we just don't know. Impacts to the Battle Road. Route 2A overlays the original Battle Road in significant areas. And to the national park, of course. It's part of it's a very simple 2-lane road without many signs, without many lights. So the visitor experience seems not to have been considered, nor the historical character of the road. So archaeology, another problem, a really big problem for the State Historic Preservation Officer, obviously. Anyway, there seems to be a lot of support even among the towns and the national park. It was the national park that put this idea on the table for a working group that would look more carefully at these issues. And Zoom meetings are a hard way to resolve complex issues. So I think if we could add that one bit to your letter, which is, I think, very, very good. Very good. That's all I have to say.
Oh, well, thank you, Nancy. Nancy
So
really
the summary.
very carefully. Bob, yep.
As I remember reading those documents when we first got them, the people who drew them up give no rationale for the changes.
Right.
They present the changes and as if you infer why we need them.
Right.
It seems to me to propose major change without any rationale for it is just in itself objectionable.
Yeah.
I know,
And-
they refer to it as a lot of pedestrians. I drive that road virtually every day. I've yet to see pedestrians along the road. They walk the trail, which is why they created the trail
Right.
for pedestrian
Right.
use.
So I guess I would say the letter should say you give no rationale or sustained evidence for the proposed changes.
Alan?
Nancy, I don't know if, I just want to ask this question. Who would take precedence in a situation like this? Would it be DOT or would it be National Park Service? Or who is pushing for this?
Initially, it was a repaving project, and that's what it's called. Let's not call it an improvement project.
It's
It's a
DOT?
repaving project, and it was supposed to be more or less a straight repaving project. But there's a big bicycle lobby in Lincoln, and they want, and elsewhere, Lexington too. I mean, many places for bike lanes that are 4 feet wide. And if you narrow the existing travel lanes to 10.5 feet, most of the stretch through the national park, you can get a 4-lane bike lane on both sides. But in some places, you might have to widen it to the extent that you need to put a stone retaining wall in place. And that's archaeology. It's almost a non-starter with the Chapeau if they're trying to fast track this. And they are trying to fast track this so that it's done by 2025.
But to Melissa's point, the people I've spoken to in Lexington know nothing about this at all.
The historical commission, the town manager responded.
Yeah.
And I'm going to meet with the town manager next week and see
So
what.
They're obligated to notify the historical commissions of all the involved communities, and they haven't. They haven't done everything. So it's unclear. The other thing I've noticed that the response letters from the various entities, the national park, the town manager of Lexington, are not all going to the same person. So it's really unclear who's on first.
Yeah,
So-
and sorry, Melissa, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, what jumped out at me was how Lincoln's response came from this, what was it, the co-chair of Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Somehow they know about it, but nothing from the Lincoln Historical Commission.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they just hadn't been notified at all or just hadn't written their own letter. So that was interesting to me. And I think we should just be prepared if we are opening up public hearings and working groups, that it sounds like there's at least some segment of Lincoln that's strongly in support of this.
Yeah.
So
They do. And the historical commission said, the historical society has not weighed in yet, but the historical commission generally supported the changes. I understand Lincoln really wants to slow down traffic. On 2A. Everybody could agree with that. There's many ways to do that, and that's what the national park really wants this working group to consider more carefully. The road now is an arterial, and arterial streets prioritize mobility and speed over access. A collector is when you have more things coming in from the side, and access is prioritized over mobility. So that's a very geeky thing, but it's technically important. So anyway.
I think Nancy brings up another point that way, that if you read through this, unless you are a highway engineer, you don't know what they're talking about. And that's another thing that's, I think, inappropriate. And I don't know if it's deliberate on their part, but it does obfuscate. I think it's really hard for all of us to know, who are just lay people, to know what is proposed. And again, as Bob says, what is the rationale for all this, other than we do understand they want to slow down traffic.
That's what the design public hearing that's in your draft would answer, because you would be able to see, instead of these plans that are very difficult to decipher unless you know the codes for everything that's on it. A design public hearing would be for the public to understand more about the nature and character of this design. What do those crosswalk things look like? What are these vertical granite curved structures, and do they have to be?
Blinking, flashing lights.
Anyway, so
I inferred from the documents that they were aiming to facilitate tourism and access in anticipation of 2025. And what I would say is our letter should say that the fundamental principle should be that you don't want to facilitate access to tourists if you erode and destroy the very thing the tourists come to
yeah,
see.
you said something like that last time. Yeah,
Tourism is an economic force, different but nonetheless powerful in its impacts, just as in industry is, and just as other kinds of uses.
Okay, so if it's okay, I will make edits and changes. And Heather, can we send it around to people so we can get the letter out? I feel strongly that I'd like to get it out, share it with the other communities, because one of the things we really do want to emphasize is to support what the park has suggested as a working group and get that going before a lot of, well, I don't know what the Mass Department of Transportation is doing, but procedurally, that's what I'm asking of you.
Yeah, we can, when we send our response letter to MassDOT, we can CC all the surrounding towns, historical commissions, and their town manager's office if you want that as well.
Okay, but and for purposes of getting the letter finished, I've got one draft. I'm going to mess around with some of these ideas. Then do I need to send it to everybody on the commission, or do I have your support that you will endorse the letter? That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, I think what we should have the commission do is vote to allow you and I to finish drafting the letter with the discussions we had tonight and send, because we can't send it out to the commission for final comments because that breaks open meeting law.
That's what I thought. Okay, so would someone?
wait.
Oh, yep.
Don't forget to copy the State Historic Preservation
Oh, I
Office.
will. That's for on assignment, right?
Yes,
Right. Okay,
Because
So-
she was on this.
yeah.
Somewhere on this.
So can I get a vote, or do I need a motion, or?
So I would move to authorize Melissa as chair of the commission and Heather as staff support to revise and submit a letter based on the discussion we had.
So all in favor? Nancy?
I
Bob?
Yep.
Alan? Oh, I don't know. Tom? I don't know.
In favor?
Okay, and Rebecca?
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so we will do that. Thank you, everybody. Moving on to the next item, this is the 1442 Main project, right, Heather?
Yes.
In your documents, it shows you some suggested street names.
Yes, so per, I believe it's the ZBA decision or the planning board decision, one of the conditions is that the fire department, police department, and historical commission okay the street names. And so the police department and the fire department have okayed the list that they've submitted to you for approval.
But so I'm a little confused because it's 3 names for Road A and 2 names for Road B, don't we? Just need one-
I think the list is okay, and then we can choose if you prefer a name, or if you are, say you're okay with all of the names, then you leave it up to the developer to make that decision, which name they want to go with.
Okay, I have a question then. I think I know Carter and Sullivan and Fowler, definitely, because he used to be head of the library, but who are Hayden and Hogan?
I don't know.
Marcia, do you know?
I don't know where they got the names from. I just
Thank
wanted,
you. I was feeling so ignorant. I was trying to do some research last night, and I thought, should I know these people? I found a Lewis Hayden, who was an African American man involved with. He was born a slave, and then he was involved with the abolition.
He lived in Boston.
But I don't know if he's this Hayden. He's the closest Hayden I could find.
No, there were Haydens in that part of Concord because it goes over the Axon line, and that was a 18th century family of some note on the landscape. None of these people are related to the developer.
No, no. Well, Loring Fowler, no. Bob Carter.
Well, so does Fowler Lane, does Fowler Street, would it take you to the Fowler Library?
I'm
No.
sure that's what it is. Well, that's what I assumed.
It's near, but you wouldn't be able to get there from Fowler Circle. It's closed
Because I was
off.
thinking, if it actually took you to the library, go for that, because you say, I'm going to the library, and there you are.
If you look at the map, they're closed circles. So it's not a
Right.
through route to the library, but it's just down the road.
And is Hayden any relation to the Joshua William Haydens from Lexington?
Oh. Oh, no.
I don't think so. I guess I don't have any objection. Do others folks have any objection to these names? So it'll be selected by the developers, what you're saying, right, Heather?
Yes.
I have an objection to their throwing a bunch of names with no context for how they chose them.
Maybe they could do Bearberry and Blueberry Lane or Cranberry Lane.
Yeah,
Russell,
Never
I
mind.
mean, it seems a meaningless enterprise for us to endorse the choice of names put forward without any basis for their nomination.
But
That's a
we
good
do
point.
have, for three of them, we do know. Bob Carter had a business there. It was kind of Mr. West Concord, and Bill Sullivan is a former selectman who also was very involved with the community. Certainly Lauren
Are
Fowler.
those, well, we don't know. You know that. We don't know.
Well,
So if they put it there, I mean, I don't know all that stuff.
Well, but the last time we were asked to weigh in on this was the property on Main Street, the
Right. Right.
McCallum Lane or something.
Yeah, something.
We don't, I don't know who he was. Or
Can I
she.
suggest something? If, we're honoring people by giving them, putting their names on the street. Our vote to honor them should be informed by some knowledge. What you just said is significant. One is a longtime selectman. So let's have them tell us who they were and why they were chosen. And then our vote would be a formal public recognition of why those people are honored.
Okay,
I would
can-
feel uncomfortable picking one over the other without knowing the various merits of these people. I'm sure they all did great things, but
Maybe.
Okay, I can
Maybe
definitely go back to them and tell them that we'd like more context and explanation behind the names before the commission takes a vote.
Thank
And
you.
did any of them support the Confederacy?
You're well-
Oh, that's a good one. Could be. Could be.
May I explain that the reason you are asked about the names of streets, it's part of the subdivision rules and regulations. And it is in response to names that were just willy-nilly, oh, let's call it Sarah Way. Well, without any context. So I think what you are asking for is absolutely correct. You should have that context as you vote for things. McCallum Lane was the name of the tract of land. And that's where that came from. It came directly from the plans that showed the subdivision from 1904. So there was context there, and you've been asked, and it's really important to have your input on these street names for Concord's history.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you.
Okay, good. Well, so thank you, because I would propose to take away two names because I'm very familiar with three of them, but if nobody else is, I think that's inadequate. So yes, Heather, if you would go back to them, or thank you. Okay.
Moving on.
The historic house marker. So for the last, many months, no one has applied for a marker until recently. And a family has requested this for 70 Elm Street. In your paper, your documents, there was information about this. And I believe, Alan, are you the person?
I think I volunteered about a year or so ago.
Yeah, I'm sorry that, because we couldn't remember, because no one has asked. So in the future, if something comes up, we would send this off to you.
Yeah.
Verify the
Right.
research.
Yep, and it's good. And it's, there's three criteria, the age, the 75-year age, the architectural significance, and then the historical significance. And this, I did try to find some more information on these houses, these 3 houses that were built, and I couldn't really dig up a whole lot of information about them, no matter where I turned in Boston and on some of the websites, on the computer. But it does suffice for the 2 of the 3 requirements for this. So.
The only question I have is that in the document that he wrote, he says to name it the William F. Hurd, that's fine, but 1856 below his name. Where did he come up with 1856?
Right, and that's what I couldn't find out when these were built, because they weren't built in 1856 unless it was the Hurd, part of the Hurd Street or before Elm Street, whatever the name was before Elm Street.
That doesn't make sense, because supposedly Samuel Wheeler had bought the old Lee farm, which was in the Joseph Barrett farm, tried to make it into a grand estate, failed at that, and then sold off property. And that's around 1858, 59. So the earlier date doesn't fit with that.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in the Macris, it says circa 1880, and in the Historic Resources Master Plan, which is basically the same source, it says circa 1875, 76. So I'm not sure what we would say.
And then it says there's a property that burned in that original one in 1859. That was the
That was
Wheeler.
that was the big Lee farm.
Right.
Thoreau goes up and inspects everything, and he has a
whole area burned.
descriptions of the property and everything that was there.
Melissa, I found some biographical information about him. He was town clerk in 1870. He was born in Rochester, New York. He married Sarah Rice in Concord in 1847. He died in Concord in 1899. And that's the bare bones. So at least we know he was town clerk and some really significant people at historic Concord in that list. And Rice seems to be an old Concord family as well. Mm-hmm. But on these internet searches, you go down dead ends. But it seems that he was a very significant person. I think the next stage would be we've got fantastic newspaper coverage for Concord in the 19th century, and obituaries were really big at the end of the 19th century. So if we could find it, I'll certainly volunteer to do that, because I'm always on microfilm and stuff. So I'll see if I can find an obit for him, because he certainly was someone.
Because we don't want to put a lot of names on this, but we want to arrive at a suitable name.
I thought we were. Is there an objection to the name of Hurd, William Hurd?
That's all I looked for. Hurd, yeah. I didn't look. Well,
I look at this and say, why don't we remember Hetty Kent, the renowned heiress of whom I'd never heard before?
I never heard it. I hadn't either. I didn't where that came from. Clearly we don't have a consensus of what we think we should call this house, right. Nor do we have a date.
An interesting thing is I've seen, I don't know where it stands now, but the National Park Service had a big discussion about whether houses should be William and Mary, Joseph and Connie, and so I've seen that a few times, but I don't know if we want to do that.
So this would be William and what, Tom, what was his wife's name?
Sarah.
There.
That was his first wife.
You could defend putting the wife's name on, because legally she would have had the widow's thirds to the real estate. And under the law of patriarchy, widow nonetheless would get that legal claim.
The third.
So what would determine the names of the plaque? Would it be the longest, the longevity of the person who lived in the house, the person who developed the property, or the most significant person that lived there?
Probably.
What's our criteria?
The existing, signs all around town are a confusion of criteria. You got 17th century houses and then mid-18th century owners lumped together. You get famous people, you get architectural style. I actually think that if these houses are associated with Hurd, who built them as a developer to have rental properties, he's probably the guy who deserves to be mentioned.
Okay, so William Hurd is still, there's still some issue though about the date.
I can dig into the dates.
Okay, if that's okay, then we'll want to just
We can put this off till next meeting.
put it off till the next meeting. I know this family it's fine, and right, Heather?
I mean, that's up to you guys if you want to send it back to them and say, we're okay with doing a circa 1880 date on it because that's what Macra says, or we can do further research and put it on the next agenda.
I would like to do some further research and then put it on the next one to do an actual chronological timeline.
Okay, all right, I will let them know.
Thank you. Okay.
There's a really good run of city directories, Concord city directories in the Concord Library. And that's a really good source to learn where buildings disappear and buildings appear and streets.
And the fire insurance map.
And the Sanborn.
Am I allowed to contact Tom offline, Heather?
Yes, yeah. He can help you figure out how to do that research.
Okay.
Yeah, shots at it. Yeah.
Thank you both. Okay, moving on to the demolition review. So in the documents, Heather has put together some ideas for us to discuss about what we might want to propose for amendments to the bylaw for next town meeting. I would just like some discussion from folks. Nancy, you're muted. Nancy?
I know. I'm just slow. I was trying to get my screen up so I could get it up on my screen, but Heather, can you put that list up? Sorry, my Zoom screen covers everything. There we go. There's that, and then there's that.
Well, there's this, yes.
Yeah, so the first thing we had discussed at our last meeting that everyone seemed amenable to was creating a submission deadline for applications each month. That way the process is more streamlined and we don't have applications coming in on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of the same week. They would all come in the same day, and then we could do site visits, all in the same day, make a decision in time for the next meeting. So basically applications would be due about a month before the meeting date, and that gives us enough time to take in the application, schedule the initial site visit, conduct the initial site visit, make a decision on whether a public hearing is necessary, and if it is, get the legal ad in time for that meeting date. So that's why I've suggested a month ahead of time.
Heather, for us to do this, do we have authority? This is just a process. Do we we can just create a process?
Yeah, I think if you just voted to create a submission deadline, that's fine.
And where am I? And you really think that this is a little less than a month? Do you really think that's enough time for the notice and all that kind of stuff?
Yep, so it basically falls in line with like HDC. Applications are due about a month ahead of time. And this would give me, I figured it would give me about a week to do the site visit and make a decision on whether we needed to get a legal ad in or not.
Okay.
Okay, I think, I would support this. Any other discussion?
Shall we vote?
Okay, you vote. So so would someone make a motion to adopt this process for demolition review?
I move that we adopt the 2021 demolition review submission deadline and meeting calendar that Heather's created.
Okay, all in favor? Alan? Nancy?
I,
Yes, Bob?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
And Rebecca?
Aye.
And me, yes. So thank you. Thank you very much, Heather. So that's part one of the demolition delay discussion. The next is which of these we might work on to propose for the amendment at the town meeting.
Do you want me to run through them?
Sure.
Okay, so potential changes to the bylaw could be partial demolition, or amend the definition of demolition in the bylaw. So right now, the bylaw is only triggered by 100% demolition of a house. So that means if they wanted to leave up one wall, like we've seen before, they don't have to go through the demolition review process. So we could change that, change in the length of the delay period. So other towns have longer delay periods than 1 year. 1 year is kind of standard and is longer than some towns. Some towns only have 6 months. Some towns like Newton have longer delay periods if the house is like listed on the National Register or that sort of thing. So there's different criteria we could look at for that. Change the delay to run with the owner, not the property. So that would mean if an owner put their house up on the market and they had gone through demolition review and they were under their delay period, they sold it. The delay period doesn't stay intact. So once the new owner takes ownership of the house, the 1 year delay period would automatically start over again. Because right now it just runs with the property. So someone could buy it and there's only a month left on the delay period. So they, aren't worried about having to wait to tear the house down. And then the other one would be some sort of fine for non-compliance. I added this one in. I think we would probably more so there would be a fine with like the building department, because if they don't follow this, then they probably haven't followed the building department process. But it's something that we could look into. And then some sort of rules and regs. So I know we just kind of approved some rules and regs, but formally drafting and adopting a set of rules and regulations that go along with the demolition review bylaw, I think could be helpful. And some of those could include like the requirement for certified engineering reports, the requiring site plans and elevations and that sort of thing, if it's found preferably preserved, conditioning requiring interior documentation prior to demolition. Right now we request access to the property to take photos of the inside before a house is taken down, but the owner doesn't have to grant us permission to do that.
Heather, do you know of other towns that have rules that have actually specified written rules and requirements?
I don't, but I can look into it.
Because it seems to, well, maybe we should keep going and then we can discuss. I'm sorry.
Oh, and then the other question was, should there be an application fee? So all the other, the HDC has an application fee, the planning board has application fees, ZBA's application fees. There's no application fee for demolition review permits.
What did that money go to,
So
Heather?
that's something we would need to justify why we would need an application fee. So for like HDC, the application fee is $25. And I believe Marcia might be able to speak more to it, but I think it goes towards like staff support that's taking in applications, any like admin things like paperwork, like things that need to be copied and that sort of thing. And I would need to look into it more to how we would justify an application fee. But a lot of the other towns do have application fees for demo review.
Okay, so I'd like to open it up for folks to comment, because I think because town meeting is going to be shortened again this year, I think it's an opportunity for us to push to improve our bylaw, put it that way. I mean, I have some strong opinions about some, but I'd like to hear from others.
I'll give you my strong opinions.
Okay,
For the bylaw changes, I would look for 1 and 3. For rules and regs, I would look hard at 2 and 3. And on the application fee, I think it's nominal, so I think we should have it for the same reasons everybody else does.
me too.
And that's it. And then I can't read below amended. Oh,
That's
those are
already-
complete. Never mind. That's all I got.
Yeah, so Bob, thoughts?
I absolutely agree with what Nancy just said.
Me too. Okay, Tom,
Um,
Rebecca?
Yeah, Nancy read my mind, just in terms of researching other towns. I did a very quick research, but for example, Canton was $15. I don't know if we want to go in that realm or if we want to be exactly with the local HDC for 25, but I can do more research if people want, lots of numbers to choose from.
Yeah. 50.
Well, it'd be,
Certainly.
I think if we could figure out an appropriate use of the money that serves the town, I could see 50, but I feel like we should, because it's an opportunity to raise some money that somehow supports preservation, and I don't know what that is. We don't actually have a program to support. Maybe Rebecca, if you would look into that, or maybe what others do.
Yeah, I can pull up a list and bring it back next meeting.
But even at $50 or $75, it's a good way to start and put money towards a preservation account or something like that.
Yeah. Okay, Alan, do you have some thoughts about, or would you support what Nancy has suggested?
I support what Nancy says. I would just raise the dollar value a little bit on that. That's all.
For the application fee?
Yes, as one who pays permits, my average permit fee is approximately $150 to $200.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I agree. Well, so I agree with Nancy too.
Yeah.
So I think maybe Heather, what we should start kind of developing language for this.
Okay.
Where are you? I can't see you anymore.
Yeah.
There you are. Because we have talked at length, I think, about the idea that the delay runs with the owner. I think we've seen this in the last few months. The application was by the developer. Well, maybe the owner who's going to sell to the developer, then that's just check one. They just check it off. So we know that. And the partial demolition, that property on Barrett's Mill upset a lot of people, but they were able to get away with it because it wasn't total. So I think then we'll just pursue developing language for these.
Okay.
And,
Yep.
Thank you. Town meeting is what, May? It's earlier this year. It's May 1st.
Yes,
Wow.
I know it's in May.
It's early. It's yeah. It's going to be indoors. That's one of the, so if it's May and it's raining, we'll be indoors. Or right now it's going to be indoors. Maybe things will change. Okay, thank you. So moving on, I just had asked Rebecca, I should have called you in advance to just ask what I was hoping is maybe you could share the list of names that you suggest we would invite as a beginning, because I'm still hoping that we could do something in October.
Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry with summer being crazy. like it's been.
That's all right.
I actually wanted, because I missed July. I really don't have much right now beyond what Marcia had sent you in an email, which was some names of folks who used to attend, past members of historical commissions, including John Althouse, Artist Boardman. People who were interested in cultural venues was Joe Wheeler, Holly Larner, and Lou Hills, and then some town staff, Leslie Wilson, Rich Ryan, Marcia herself.
So some of those people are gone. So those are, some of those last ones are categories of folks. So that's easy to amend. And I would, so maybe we could offline talk, because I'm thinking, you know, some of the commissions of the committees, the people who manage and run the various historic properties throughout the community, and also the historical commissions of the adjacent communities of town. I mean,
Okay.
this whole Battle Road project just screams out the value of something like this, where people, communities get together and share their information. So, and there's no, you know, I don't have a date for this. I thought maybe October, maybe it's not until November. And certainly my idea was that it would be in person. Zoom meetings are productive, sort of, but they're not nearly as good as in person. And it's all, I think the COVID virus is more in charge at the moment. So maybe we'd just be working on that. I'll send you some stuff I'm thinking about.
Yes, that would be great. And if anybody else here has ideas for who should or could be included, please let me know. And then I'll present a full list at September's meeting.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you. So anybody have any reports from their observer activities?
I sat on the historic district commission, sat in on that. And to your point, Melissa, and I believe Nancy's point, the parcel of land at the corner of Lowell Road and Barrett's Mill Road, because the builder, he submitted drawings.
Oh,
Yeah, he submitted drawings, and that's a narrow lot, as you know.
yes.
Yeah.
And the architect presented the plans, and it was, if I
It
can
was not on their agenda.
it wasn't on their
business.
agenda. It was
Yeah.
just kind of brought up.
It was on other business.
It was, yeah, it was just
It-
kind of.
It's not an
Oh.
application yet.
I've been looking for that too.
Yes, you
Right.
have. So, but
Oh,
it'll be
Don't-
continued to the next.
Don't
meeting.
worry, Nancy, there were a lot of hair on people's backs were raised.
oh,
Yes.
excellent.
So,
Glad you were there. I'm glad you were there. I wouldn't.
yes,
I
yes.
was gonna call somebody from that neighborhood and I didn't
Yeah,
get.
yeah. So it was, there's if I remember correctly, Heather, it's an ongoing discussion. Back to the drawing boards, a lot of unhappy people. We need to preserve this intersection.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was quite an informative meeting. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Heather, but I would say, I think 100% of the people are against what was there, what was presented.
Were
Right,
neighbors
Heather,
there?
if I'm-
Right,
not
neighbors
mistaken.
were there, and the HGC kind of gave some initial feedback on like the style of the house, the massing of the house, the placement of the house on the lot. And just to let you guys know, the HGC can't tell them, no, you can't build a house here. Because, you know, legally they're allowed, it's a buildable lot, and as long as they meet all their zoning requirements, the HGC has to work with them to build a house on that lot. So,
That's acceptable to everyone there.
Yeah.
right.
I'm concerned about how everybody seemed to know, but it wasn't publicly known that this was gonna come up.
It was
That's
on
what-
the agenda of under other business,
I
Nancy.
didn't see- When, that must have been added late.
I think it got added on Monday of the meeting.
Wow.
And we did let neighbors know because they are on our email list. They've requested to be informed.
So Heather, it will be continued to next month or the next meeting.
No, so it wasn't public hearing, so
Oh.
there was no application submitted.
Okay.
So there's no
No, they gave
continuance.
us-
It's whenever they want to come back for another informal discussion or whenever they want to actually formally apply for a certificate.
There's
So,
nothing formally decided or done.
no,
was-
but
it was
a
just-
lot of discussion and opinions were
It was a
given,
back and forth.
and there were drawings that were available. Were
Right.
drawings posted too?
Yep, on the website.
Do you? Okay, I'll look at when, but I've been trying to keep up with HDC because we have some contacts with some of the neighbors there. So
Yep,
I'm
they're,
trying-
I don't know if they're still on the website because Heather may have taken them down for the next meeting. But you can always look at the Zoom recording of the meeting
If
on
it's up-
YouTube.
Yeah, the minutes are really lacking. No offense to you because you've got too much to do, frankly, in my own opinion. But does Heather Carey do those minutes or do you have to?
We split who does, I do one
Okay.
meeting a month and she does one meeting a month.
Okay, it'd be better not to have to listen to, well, never mind. You think the recording's up?
Yeah, the recording's on YouTube.
It is. Okay.
Mhm.
Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you, Alan.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments or reports from anyone?
Oh.
Nance?
I had a really nice conversation, although I haven't been to the next Public Works Commission meeting. Stephen, what's his last name? Do you know? It's escaping me, Heather. He's a town engineer now, Stephen. It will come to me.
It's like Duval or.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It'll come to me. But anyway, I called him and I called him basically to ask him if they had heard anything about the Route 2A project because the reconfiguration of the intersection at Lexington Road, 2A and Bypass Road is significant part of that is in Concord. That's where the boundary between Lincoln and Concord gets really funny and it gets split down the middle of Lexington Road and split down the middle of 2A. And he said yes. And he said that they had been contacted by email by Mass DOT to comment on it. And they sent them some information. They said they didn't have enough to make any kind of judgment about it. And so they were reviewing the meeting, or they were reviewing the same drawings that we've had an opportunity to look at. And I told him I'd give him the sense of our meeting after tonight, if that's okay.
Yes.
So he's new to town. He's really quite new to town. And didn't realize the relationship between the national park and the historic significance of 2A on April 19th, blah, blah, blah. So he was happy to know that. So,
Thank you. Yeah.
So it's good that we show up at these meetings, I think, Ellen.
Yeah.
And everybody else, it's good. It's good.
And also tell you who's getting new signs on their buildings.
Oh,
Right.
that's good. There is, this Hildreth Corner is where that new house is going to be built. Right down at one street past Hildreth Street, there is a brand new, incredible estate-like stone wall at the corner. They took out what had been a simple fall down low road stone wall.
Yes.
I don't know if the town did that or if the owner did that, but
I think it's private. That's private, that wall.
is it?
Yeah,
It's a
Nice wall.
formidable wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's no other comment, how about we discuss the minutes from July 8th? I did not have any changes. How about anybody else? Thank you, Heather, always. Anyone have any changes to propose, or would someone move that we accept the minutes as presented from July 8th? You're muted.
So moved. I didn't say
second.
anything. I didn't say anything yet.
Oh. A second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, Alan? Tom?
Uh.
Nancy, I guess I should make
Aye.
people say words. Bob?
Aye.
Aye, and Rebecca?
Hi.
And Melissa, yes. Thank you. So that concludes our meeting, but I see Linda who
Yeah.
would like to say something. Hello, Linda.
Hi, Melissa. How are you? And all of you, I always enjoy your meetings. You skipped over, did anyone else have a public comment so quickly that I didn't have a chance to?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. I just want to comment on a couple things. I always enjoy your meetings. And I appreciate thinking ahead, all of you thinking ahead for the town meeting. I know it's early, but Carmen Reese, the town moderator, did at least is planning preliminarily that there will be presentations this year at the town meeting itself, and maybe less emphasis on the presentations that were posted online ahead of time. So I just wanted to give you a heads up if she stays with that plan, since you were commenting on the process.
Darn, because
And then the other thing is Ellen's comments and then Heather's comments about the preliminary discussion the other night on Lowell Road for the, near the historic corner there, and the public, myriad of public comments on the preliminary plan. I did mention that at the select board meeting, because I think, as you've pointed out, we're going to hear much more about that going forward. And then the other thing is, please stop me if you are already aware of this and have covered this at a previous meeting, but the planning board did approve the other night the West Concord Advisory Committee Design Guideline Preamble. And I encourage all of you to look at that if you haven't already seen it, because of the historic references and the sense of place that they included in the narrative for that preamble.
where would we find that? Would that be under the planning board documents or?
Yes, yeah, if it, I assume it's still posted there, yeah. And if not, I would guess that they've got it up on the West Concord Advisory Committee document list too.
Okay.
So thank you for letting me comment.
Oh, no, thank you very much for.
Before you all escape.
No, thank you.
you.
That's important. Well, then any other final business? Our next meeting is September
Wow.
something. I'm looking at you, Heather.
Yeah,
I got all this
September
combined.
9th.
September 9th. Okay. September 9th. Okay. And presumably by Zoom, right?
Yes.
Okay.
When can we have an in-person meeting? I know it's not great for Heather, but she could dial in.
So some boards are doing like a hybrid where the board meets in person, and then Zooms is also on Zoom, so the public can either come in person or on Zoom. I think if we do that, I have to find a babysitter. 'Cause my husband is not home right now. And
you couldn't be remote.
I couldn't, because I have to set up the meeting and let you in and lock the building behind you.
That's right.
And I think if that's the way we go, I believe
Chad?
everyone on the committee, we would need to have a quorum of people in person. Your
Yeah.
quorum doesn't count on Zoom anymore, I think, if you're meeting in person with these quasi. I'm not sure, I'd have to
Oh,
follow
okay.
up on that.
Okay, never mind.
But
Maybe
what
not
I've read on other agendas is there'll be a quorum of
the board
committee
or
members
committee
in the
members.
building,
Yeah.
and then you
Other,
could be on Zoom if you've already met quorum in the building.
Yeah.
So it would need to be a discussion with everyone. Is everyone comfortable meeting in person again? Because people wouldn't be able to Zoom in and help meet quorum,
okay,
I believe.
Well, okay.
maybe not September.
Yeah, I think unless there's a great opposition, I think we should continue with Zoom in September.
Yeah, it has its advantages.
Okay, well, thank everyone for the meeting and your input. And all our assignments, we'll be working to preserve Concord.
Indeed.
Okay, good
Okay.
night.
Have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.